Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. The time is 9:01 a.m. and you are listening to and watching Good Morning, Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. It's Wednesday. It's the day before Thanksgiving. Before we get started, I hope, and by extension, our team hopes that you have a blessed, positive, safe, prosperous, and a great time with your family for the Thanksgiving and upcoming holiday and a nice time off of work if you're not going to be working for these next few days. And in fact, this is going to be the last Good Morning Aurora for the rest of this week. We will return next week. But before we go, we got a great guest today. We have an author. We've got a teacher. He's the author of A Boy Scout Goes to Spain and Other Stories. His name is Tim Schaiberger. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me today.
Good to see you, man. Good to meet
see you. You too as well.
Interested in this book, very much so. And I want to start off reading just a tad bit about the book. In the midst of the harrowing Great Depression in 1934, a significant moment unfolded, bridging two cities named Toledo, Ohio, and Toledo, Spain. A delegation from the American city embarked on a transformative journey to establish a bond of cultural exchange and ideas. What a way to set things up. Tell us about this amazing book.
Well, once again, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm so excited to be here. Look forward to talking about this in the city of Aurora. I hope learns more. Been a part of you guys for about 5 years now. I moved down here and really enjoying it. This has been a work of labor and love about this book. I unfortunately lost my father to Agent Orange. He had brain cancer. He was in Vietnam and passed away about 20 years ago. And I was going through, as you'll read in the book, so I was going kind of through things that his leftovers. I found an old lockbox that I'd always seen and never looked in it before, opened it up. And I always thought it was my dad's stuff, but it was my grandpa's stuff. And my grandpa passed away when I was like 13. I was close with him, but didn't really know a lot about him. And I was searching through, just kind of looking through all this stuff. I found a little brown travel journal that said "My Trip" on it in gold letters. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. This must be a journal that somebody just kept.
Right.
And I opened it up and started reading it. And the first thing it said was leaving, I think, May 15th, 1934 for Toledo, Spain. And I'm like, wait, what is this? And so I spent literally the next hour trying to decipher the cursive and saw all these autographs and all these, you know, like an illustration of a bus accident and like all these quotes in Spanish, and then realizing, oh my God, my grandpa went to Spain in the 1930s and kept a journal of the 3 months he was there.
Right.
So
3
I
months.
went 3 months. So it goes from May through July. And he kept a journal of what happened every day while he was there. He talks going to bullfights. He's in a bus accident. They get robbed. Like it reads almost like an adventure story. Or I liked the beginning of it. I try to kind of compare to beginning of not Raiders of the Lost Ark, but the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the beginning with River Phoenix, like that Boy Scout.
One of my favorite movies.
So that is how I try to get people, like that's kind of how my but it's just very interesting story. And then looking further through the trunk. So I had 3 months of that, and I kind of went through, edited it, typed it up, reading through this, beautiful script, cursive writing that nowadays people probably would be like, what is that even?
Our grandparents, absolutely. That's what they wrote. Everything like that, yes.
Yep. So once I kind of interpreted that and wrote it down, it's like, okay, this is a cool story. And then as I was looking through the box, I found another journal that was later, about 10 years later, and that was from when my grandfather got drafted into World War II. And when he got drafted into World War II, my grandmother was 6 months pregnant with my father.
Wow.
So my father didn't get to meet my grandpa till he was almost 3 years old.
Right.
So, but he also kept another journal because he was a writer, and he would go through and started writing what happened there. So that's one of the other stories. Most of the book is his journal about being in Spain, but he also kept another couple months about when he first got drafted in World War II. He was a surgeon, so he was drafted as a services officer.
Okay.
So he never really saw combat, but he was in the first MASH unit after D-Day. Like he was one of the first MASH units set up after the D-Day invasion in France. And then the end of the story and the end of the book is it's actually a letter that my father wrote to my mom about his experience during the Tet Offensive at the Fulak Forward Operating Base. And it is a very harrowing tale of that battle. And I'm actually working on a sequel right now to this book, which is actually going to follow up on my parents' relationship during Vietnam.
And that one's going to be titled and specifically about the Vietnam experience, but with your parents.
Yes. So this one is more, like I said, this is a collection of journals that reads as like a history book. It's shorter, but it's just a cool story.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have cool stories from their family and stuff, but
not
everybody puts them together. This entire thing started, it's been a 20-year plan. I typed it up, put it together. Never had really interest in it, never heard back. Had to move down here, had a little bit extra money. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to print this up, give it to my uncles and my cousins as like a Christmas gift or something.
Right. Keep it in the family.
Contacted the people, this group that was going to do that. And they're like, actually, we really like this story and we think we should, we'd love to publish it. And then I'm like, oh, so next thing you know, I'm signing a publishing contract. And
that's awesome.
My book's everywhere now. So
congratulations. Speaking of which, the link to this book on Amazon is one place you could purchase it. It is in the description of this video. We encourage you to go check it out. A Boy Scout Goes to Spain and Other Stories. The time is 9:08. When I first started reading about the book, the thing that struck out to me was that this covers 3 conflicts.
Yes.
The Spanish Civil War, the Spanish Civil War, World War II, and then a little bit of Vietnam.
Yes.
With the documentation and everything like that, dates, times, and places, what was that like? Putting that together, using a little bit of cursive and all that other stuff.
So one of the most interesting things in my research, so when I first moved down here a while ago, various reasons, I was actually turned this into a screenplay. So I actually took this story, which is kind of like it's a 16-year-old talking about being in Spain and all the cool stuff, but I kind of added stuff to it.
He was 16?
He was only 16 when he did this. Yeah, and he was a Boy Scout. And like, that's why I've really been focusing on that.
What an experience.
Oh, and did you be by himself? Oh, no, completely. So putting together this story was, so the part about the Spanish Civil War is this kind of a precursor, because a lot of people, like, that's even lesser well known than like a lot of other things like we were discussing before we started. But one of the things that people, in my research, I found out one of the first skirmishes, like one of the first between it's actually conservatives and the socialists are actually what the war was about there.
Yep.
But one of the first skirmishes between them happened in 1934. And that was the year my grandfather was there.
Wow.
So this was all a precursor about the government, because it was pretty much the government losing the government and then coming back over again. So it flopped. Nothing to relate to now or anything. But,
exactly.
But the whole point was, as a 16-year-old, my grandfather went there during a time of the Great Depression, but he came from a very wealthy family and was kind of well off. So everything he saw, he notices a lot of like the poor people and stuff, but he hears numerous times mentions from the adults around him. He's like, boy, the government's going to fall any day now. Watch out, the government's going to fall any day now. And one of the coolest thing I found, and one of the reasons why I named it A Boy Scout Goes to Spain, is because he was really into scouting, and he was going to go to the International Scout meeting while he was in Spain. Mm-hmm. And he had taken his entire scouting outfit, and he was super concerned that his red kerchief, they think he was a socialist because of the red kerchief that he would wear for that. And he wrote about it in his journal, like, oh my God, I hope I don't get attacked or something for that.
One of the most famous and known traditional pieces of the Boy Scout regalia.
Exactly.
I mean, it
exactly
is, right.
Yep. So that
people
was
join
cool.
because of that,
Yep. So him going through that, which I try to use, and I actually, calling a Boy Scout, I've worked with some Boy Scouts groups like the Three Fires Council. St. Charles.
Lynn Bogacki. Shout out.
Yeah. I actually was at the Sycamore High School a couple weeks ago with their Scout training regimen. I had a table there and found out some very cool things about scouting. But pointing that out as I'm trying to the reason I think my story relates to a lot of people is it kind of shows how my grandpa was a scout, Eagle Scout. It will never made Eagle Scout. He couldn't swim good enough, but he loved scouting.
Yeah.
But it showed, I just want people to show, because my father was also a Boy Scout, and they both became successful doctors and surgeons and stuff, like going through kind of those steps and everything.
Yeah.
But so that was kind of the beginning is about Spain right on the cusp of war. So you're seeing everything that's going together, and just, a 16-year-old from Toledo, Ohio is kind of noticing that stuff, and you kind of notice writing about it.
Right.
So it just kind of ends as a story, but then as he gets drafted into World War II, as a surgeon, you get to hear like firsthand like the injured bodies coming back, and then you start seeing the follies of war, and just he's seeing all these things and was never really behind killing. He's a doctor. He never really wanted to hurt anybody. Yep. And then in the Vietnam story is actually the one I'm closest to because that's my own father. And Vietnam's what directly, him getting sick and stuff and passing. But it is actually the last part of this book is a handwritten letter that my father wrote to my mom to kind of, he's like, this was the most harrowing experience of my life. And I wanted to make sure the, person I love most in the world, knows what I remember from it.
Right.
So these are all super personal retellings of experiences on the wars or the cusp of war.
Right.
And I think that's a really good, it makes you think, and it makes me realize personally, and a lot of people, there's a chance I might not have ever existed. Like if my grandpa never made it back, or my dad, or if something happened, like it's just weird to look back at the chances of life and be able to put it down.
It's what I like about it is it's very reflective. Yeah. That's what I think is amazing about it.
Yep.
It's really reflective. It's not, this is not a case of an author taking a great story and then retelling it. Mm-hmm. These are rather personal family historical documents turned into a novel, which I think is just absolutely great. That to me speaks a lot about the individual story.
Definitely.
And we all have one. We all have an individual story. Eric Pry, I'm just thinking about Eric Pry right now at the GAR Museum, our military museum here. Yeah. In there are artifacts from Aurorans dating back to the Revolutionary War.
That's awesome.
So it's, letters and all kinds of stuff, and it does add that actual real tissue that you can feel about a person's or individual or family story.
It makes it real. It makes it realize there's a lot of stuff happened before we were around to experience it.
Absolutely.
And it affected our lives.
The time is 9:14 a.m. Good morning to Mondo Valdez. Good morning to you, Freddie. Good morning. Kevin May is here. Tracy Duran, DJ Spanky D, Maria Chorito, Stacy Cardona. Thank you very much for your stars. Rachel Cleghorn is here. So many people. Daniel Calderon is here. Look at Luz Elna Brambila Guerrero. Good morning to all of you guys. Happy day before Thanksgiving. We are here with Timothy Schaiberger, who is the author of A Boy Scout Goes to Spain and Other Stories. The time is 9:14. Such amazing stories. I will definitely order the book and check it out. This is why I always tell folks to note their family history and talk to their older family members before they pass away. Excuse me about that. That's awesome. Yeah. As I was reading this, and I'm going to read this brief sentence. Within these pages lies not only my grandfather's account, but also the intimate records of the first 2 months of his World War II draft.
Yes.
That is what intrigues me, which is why I'm going to read the book, is, I can only imagine what it must have been like for a guy who was 16 in 1934 going to Spain. Because I know how I felt being 20 going to Panama.
Yeah.
Like, that's not an experience that everybody's going to feel. So to have that in actual words or documentation is just really amazing.
Yes.
Gets robbed, a bus accident, just minute details of an everyday life experience.
Yeah.
Now, you're also a teacher.
Yes, I'm the building substitute teacher at Herget Middle School.
Okay,
so
my man.
So
you
I
look
coach
like a
football
teacher
there
now. It all
too,
makes sense.
Yeah, right. It all makes sense, right? That's what all my friends have been saying. I play music and stuff too, and a lot of my friends at these open mics are like, "Oh, it's the teacher guy. It's the teacher." Just because I'm explaining things and I want you to know what's going on doesn't mean
right.
But yeah, I coach football there too. So go Huskies.
All right, go Huskies. Now, what is it like? Being in education?
Yes,
but also learning and going back in time, reviewing, and going through these different processes.
That is why I would love to get this to be a part of curriculum for some of these kids. Because one of the most interesting parts about putting this book together is it's a collection of journals. I edited it and kind of translated it, but 75% of this is a 16-year-old Boy Scout from Toledo, Ohio in 1934 who went on a to across the Atlantic Ocean
Right.
on a ship, mind you. There weren't no planes making Atlantic flights at this point with people in 1934. There was no other way
Right.
to get to Europe for a normal person. And he actually, if you read through it, it was a big delegation. It was a big celebration. It really showed him the parts that weren't being celebrated and didn't have money during the Depression, because he comments on so many poor people when he gets there and
Right.
seeing all these, like, why are there so many bums? Why are there? And it's like, because the world isn't all like that. So it's kind of
Right.
cool. Like, you actually see him in his journal realizing the things that he's seeing
Right.
in the real world. And
Yeah, like, oh,
so,
yeah, they don't got canned goods.
yeah,
Oh,
and
little
but-
things.
But the analogies you can make, though, to get back to like the education
Mm-hmm.
part, is a lot of people just don't know the history of why things are the way they are. And that just basic things on why does this happen? Like, I'm mad about this. And it's like, well, let's look back at history and what has happened over the past,
Right.
of why this is the way it is.
Right.
But right or wrong, whatever, this is why it is.
Right.
This is, you need to know the basic things. And a lot of I keep seeing this thing about, a lot of cursive, like we were talking earlier, might be going away, and like, oh, just write things in cursive, and all these like, Gen Z kids can't read it and stuff. But it's
Right.
like, and I'm just like, and I agree with that, but it's also a lot of the documents, unless people like myself are saving them like this and typing them up,
Right.
99% of them are never going to be read anyways, because
Right.
they just disappear. So taking what we already have and the knowledge we already have, let's make sure kids can comprehend that, at least from the
Right.
documents we've
Sure.
taken. But that's what the coolest thing about this is I can apply to this. Like, he was 16. He would have been a sophomore in high school, and he was keeping track of all these things. One of the things I point out is nowadays kids are, I am too, whatever, we're all guilty of it now. We're on our phones. We don't pay attention. We're not in the moment. When you are taking, a ship from the south of Spain over into Morocco for a couple days to sleep in random travelers' buildings, to see the to see the fish just sitting out, to see the unusual shoes. He cannot understand how they could keep the shoes on their feet because they curled so much.
Right.
When they're in Morocco, a little boy gives them a tour. The next day he meets up with them, and the authorities take the boy away, and they never saw him again because he wasn't allowed to do that.
Right.
And it's like just passing notes in a journal. So with little things like that,
That would've been
implying
so
to
cool.
kids nowadays, like history, I was really into. I got to do a long-term sub for one of our social studies teacher had a kid, so I was in there for a while.
Okay.
And it was really interesting because we were talking about government, and just randomly, and it was during the time a couple of years, like last year, when the Speaker of the House or whatever was going through, and I'm like,
Yes.
hey guys, remember how I just taught you about the Speaker of the House?
Yeah.
They're talking about it, so it was kind of cool to bring history into this.
Right.
And when I take this book and I speak to like mostly middle schools at this point, I'm trying to get into some high schools because I have a whole presentation about this and appreciating your family, history, how it's important now.
Sure.
But the education thing is it's firsthand experience, and
Yes.
that's a big thing. It's not some doctoral thesis. It's not some distant, tome in like Shakespearean language. It's everything was swell.
Yes.
And that sure was neat. And it's like, but you really get the experience of how you can relate to that. And relating things and analogies is the way I approach everything. If I know what you're into and you need to learn about something, if I know a little bit about what you're into, I can relate that.
Make it
to
yours.
that. I'll
Absolutely.
make that yours.
Yep.
Exactly. Oh, you're into football. You're into you're into music. Like I will
Yeah.
show you like what It's just kind of like using a philosopher, like what professional wrestler with this philosopher.
It's a good way to learn and teach people.
It's the best
It
way,
is.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good way to learn and teach people, which actually brings me to what I was going to talk about next with you. Time is 9:21. My goodness, time is going by fast. Saul Olivas, good morning. How are you guys doing? Finally get to see you live. Happy fall, Thanksgiving break to all the school staff members.
Yeah.
That's right. Shout out to all the teachers and educators.
Hope you're
out
watching.
there. Lots of fans of this show. Vanessa Acosta, good morning. Leanne Ports, good morning to you. Now, here's the thing.
Yes.
There's a whole lot of good documentaries that one can find on PBS and all kind of things that detail World War II.
Yes.
Less known are a lot of the conflicts that happened right before World War II,
Exactly.
which in many cases, as we talked about, were German armies using all kinds of places of the world to test weapons and do different
Yes.
things. And hey, get your kicks over here. Here's the thing. I wonder, are we able, and by we, I mean as a society,
Yeah.
are we at a point where we're accurately and confidently confronting some of the wrongs with history and using what we're learning to forge today's educations and forge today's path? Or are there still lessons like the tragedies of Guernica?
Yeah, yeah.
Are there still lessons that we as a society are missing? And is there something that we could do about that?
Yes, yes. More. This was the big thing, and I always recommend this book more than any other book. I'm a big recommender of books to people. Mm-hmm. Howard Zinn's History of the American People. That is the most sound explanation of history because it's told from the points of view of people or actual cited sources. There's no spin. There's no spin. It's like a personal recollection. It's personal journals. It's a collection of newspaper articles back before, there was 2 or 3 media companies where every newspaper had their own opinion and all that stuff.
Absolutely, yep.
The thing about history is I personally think you just need, it's already interesting to me, but some people don't get it. You still hear kids being like, well, if it happened before I was born, it doesn't matter. And it's like so many things happened before you were born that totally matter. But that's kind of just a view on them because they think they're in the moment, but nobody's in the moment. Everybody's on their phone. Everybody's distracted. Being in the moment, maybe you would realize like, boy, this bridge is breaking down. And it's like, I remember my grandma saying something about the last time this bridge was fixed and it washed away. And you're sitting there just basic forms of government not knowing history. Like, when's the last time we invested money in the roads? Things like that. But you have to make it interesting. And a good way to make it interesting, like I said, is to apply it to things or make it analogous to what people do in their life. So you have to show them, like you were mentioning, like cyclical stuff. But the thing that's going on in the world right now, I was a vice mayor of my hometown for years and ran for state house in Michigan a bunch of times. So I had a bunch of firsthand experience in like that kind of aspects. And it all comes down to knowing your history and just knowing the basics on how things work. And if you don't know your history, you're not going to know the basics of how things work.
Sure.
And that's more than anything. I'm all about education. I try not to chide people if they don't know any better, but there are basic objective facts, rules, and institutions that work a certain way.
Absolutely.
And if you don't know how they work, then it's different. Like your local
state laws
dog catcher,
and things like
drain
that.
commissioner is really going to have a more direct than your senator is going to have some issues, but your local drain commissioner, their senator doesn't care if your basement's flooding.
Right.
The drain commissioner, you're going to give him an earful about that.
Absolutely.
He's going to directly affect you. And
he's touchable to you.
He's touchable. And that was my, I got 13,000 votes and didn't spend over $1,000 on advertising. So I was pretty happy with that.
No, I completely agree with what you say because again, that basic knowledge of how things work will strengthen your argument, or if you're wise enough, will show you that, maybe I don't have one. Things take time, like changing laws and zoning and why this and why that, legislation. There is a lot that goes into.
15% of your voting population might be making that choice in and off your election, and the next thing you know, 30 people decided that your taxes all went up because they didn't understand millage.
And with that,
it's
you're
crazy.
coming back for a second
Sorry.
episode. No. And with that, you just got yourself a part 2 on this show.
I mean,
buddy.
if you can, I was about to say, man, if that's Mr. City's
you just got you just got a part 2 on this show.
If you want to talk politics, that's kind of my wheelhouse as well.
So the time is 9:25. It is important because this book talks about dates and places of importance in which Americans lost their lives.
Completely.
And that is something worth being aware of and noting. These are international issues in a tangible human form, tangible American form. This to me, haven't read it yet, but seems to be a great American novel. The time is 9:26. So, a couple things before we start to go. I'm gotta give you the last word here. Let me read. Yeah, right here. All right. So, additionally, my own father's personal encounter during a fateful night in the Tet Offensive during the Vietnam War finds a place with these sacred journals. Let me read the second sentence before actually. The weighty burden of conflict descended upon Your grandfather and his journal bears witness to the trials and tribulations of that pivotal time. Additionally, my own father's personal encounter during a fateful night of the Tet Offensive during the Vietnam War finds a place within these sacred journals. With that, telling two stories of two men in two different places in time, that's amazing work.
I have been fortunate enough and blessed that I'm one of those people where I really appreciate my family, and they have accomplished a lot. My grandfather, the Boy Scout of said story, he had we have like a huge county history book, and my grandfather has an entire chapter in it. He was one of the first surgeons north of Bay City in Michigan, like one of the first general surgeons, came up there directly from Toledo, Ohio. My dad was worked in Tawas, Michigan. He was the director of the ER there. He was a general surgeon. So they both ended up becoming really successful doctors. But one of the interesting things about my father is he kind of talked about Vietnam, and this story was actually the story was immortalized in a comic book called Viet Mime that I published about 15 years ago that nobody ever read. But the thing is I'm working on the sequel right now, which is going to cover the Vietnam experience, because that is another war where I'm actually working on a part right now where I'm explaining the basis of why we were even there, which goes back to my idea of why these things happen. You know, in 1859, if the French didn't really want to get in on the colonization, there wouldn't have been a huge issue. Like Vietnam was kind of going good. I could get started. I got an hour and a half on that.
That's amazing history.
So
come on now. Come on now. You found a receptive audience. I love the history.
So all that stuff I want to kind of explain to people, and it's kind of I'm using as adjunct to kind of bring in my uncle, who was also in Vietnam. But my dad got called in. He was in the military 18 months. He was an instructor.
Right.
And so there's a cool story there. But my uncle was like, okay, you did some bad stuff. It's jail or Vietnam.
Yep.
And so they kind of ended up in basic training at the same time. So it's kind of a cool story there. But once again, everything you're talking about, the history and like the geoeconomic consequences of all this stuff, people don't understand why things aren't, why are they so expensive? It's like, rich people are making money, man. That's why things are so expensive. I don't know why nobody gets that. Sorry I said that through gritted teeth, man, but sometimes I get in trouble for that. So anyway, this is a reflection on good people, I think, who went through some pretty harrowing times and ended up being good people still. And I just think it's a cool story as well.
I think it's a cool story also. The link to this book, A Boy Scout Goes to Spain and Other Stories, is in the description of this video. Time is 9:29. We got to wrap it up.
One more thing real quick?
Yeah, you got yep, go ahead.
Thank you so much, everybody. But A Boy Scout Goes to Spain.com is my website. You can order the book from all different places there, and there's a bunch of other cool short stories and essays, and a really cool essay I wrote on student loans. So if you are interested in that or want to know more.
All right.
So my
Check
personal
it out.
experience.
Check out the website.
Thank you.
Right now, Buenos Dias Aurora is about to begin. I hope that you guys have a blessed, positive, wonderful, and awesome day and a Thanksgiving holiday with yourself and your family. Take care of yourself and each other.
Being a local business in Chicago, we've always worked with community banks, but over time, those smaller banks started getting acquired by larger national footprint banks. It became time to work with Wintrust to meet our needs without having to have that big bank feel.
Wintrust understood what they wanted to accomplish, and they've increased in size 5 times over.
As we continue to grow, we're going to keep needing to borrow, so I'm sure they're going to love that.
Serving their needs. It's really the foundation of what Wintrust commercial banking is all about.